I think that most people would say that stories are important, not just to us individually, but to our cultures and our tribes, the people we hang with. And I would bet that most of you would say stories are critically important, and you could probably even give me a couple of stories that have shaped you and made you who you are. But do you know why stories are important? Do you know what makes them so special and, on some level, world-altering? Well, I'm doing something a little different today because, I can. And I'm going to tell you why stories matter to us as people, and it has to do with how our brains actually work. On this channel, the focus is on story and storytelling within the medium of screenwriting, but I know there are several regulars here who also write novels and short stories and poetry and a few other things, and normally I'm talking about a tool or tip of either story or storytelling, but I haven't talked about why stories are important, and I wanted to do that. Not because the knowledge is going to change the story that you're writing right now or really even make it better, but it will make you better as a storyteller. It'll help give you some purpose and some agency for why doing what you do is important, not just to you, but to those who will participate in the stories you tell. And I know something I say is not just going to change how you approach writing, but it may change how you view other people and how you can become even more benevolent as a writer, which is something I talk about from time to time. Okay, why are stories so impactful to people? Well, it has to do with how our brains actually work. I'm sure you've had the experience of driving in the car or sitting in a restaurant somewhere and a song just starts playing and you haven't heard it in years, and yet you can remember all the words. But ironically, you can't remember what you did last Tuesday, but you can remember the lyrics of a song you learned when you were 13 years old. And for some of you, that was a long, long time ago. It's also the reason you remember the basic story of movies that you've seen, or books that you've read, or one of Taylor Swift's songs. It has to do with your long-term memory and how it works. Your long-term memory contains your knowledge of the world. It helps you make sense of things, and it has a massive storage capacity. You can always learn more. And what happens when you learn something is the new fact gets stored in your brain. But what you need are ways to access that fact. And those ways are essentially roads to the facts that are in your brain. So you got facts everywhere and you've got roads. Those roads are called schemas. And the more schemas you have connecting to a fact, the easier that fact is to remember. This is why it was hard for you to remember dates and facts in history class unless you had a way of making a rhyme or a story or some other schemas that you could connect to the fact. This is also why when you learn something about, say, screenwriting, if you only hear it one time, you probably won't remember it. But if I can find a way to make an engaging video or tell you a story or use an example or do something that helps you build additional schema to the fact you're learning, you have a better chance of remembering it. It's kind of like those small towns. They only have one road or two roads to maybe get to them, so they're hard to get to. But the bigger the city, the more roads leading to the city, the easier it is to get to. That's what we're trying to do. You want the facts, and you want to create as many schema to get to those facts as you can. The more schema, the easier the facts are to remember. But those facts and schema are housed in our long-term memory. So how do we update our long-term memory? How do we add roads? How do we build new schema to connect to the facts that we're learning? And there are two ways this happens, actually. And the first one is one that YouTube actually hates, and it's rest and sleep. You see, when you are awake, your brain is working. Information in, information out, just all the time, and it doesn't have time to build schema. But when you sleep and when you rest, your brain can spend more energy on building schema. And YouTube doesn't want you to sleep and rest. It wants you to binge watch videos. And those of you who binge my channel, I thank you. But I have something for you to do to make that binging even better for you in the long run. So literally, if after watching a YouTube video like this one, you just hit pause and sit quietly for 30 seconds. Don't try to think of anything, just let your mind wander, let it rest, veg out. You'd actually be a more effective learner in the long run. YouTube wants you to click on another video, which is why I link videos at the end, and it's why interacting with the fun buttons below helps me out. But if you want to learn something, like if you want to really learn it, then after you watch or read something, then sit quietly, veg out for 30 seconds or so, 10 seconds minimum, and over time you're going to begin to notice a major difference. But the second way to update schema is to engage, for you to engage in new experiences. And this is where stories come in. Because anytime you engage in a new experience, your brain is forced to right then make new schema, because it has to make sense of what's happening. And if it's a new thing, the brain is like, well, I can't just leave this fact unconnected and floating around. It's got to go somewhere. And so it forces schema to build and connect to the facts and things you're learning because of the new experience you're participating in. But when you participate in a story, and you are participating in a story when you watch or read or whatever, that is a new experience. So the song you know the lyrics to is a story, and your brain had to create a strong schema to it, and now you remember it. It's why you can remember a movie or book you like, and many of the details of those things, simply because you participated in the story. And so your job as a storyteller is to work to keep the audience engaged in the story. And if you don't know or have the tools of story or of storytelling at your disposal, you need to learn. Now, there's a couple of other things in your long-term memory that makes knowing how stories impact people even more important than what I've just told you. And the first one pertains to you, the storyteller, and that is procedures. And you may think, okay, Jake, why do I need to know procedures are in my long-term memory? Like, how is that more important? Well, it's because the procedure you use to write a screenplay is embedded in your long-term memory. And if you don't have the tools you need to be effective at the process of writing a screenplay, like if you don't know how to navigate the process of writing a screenplay, you won't ever be able to effectively write a screenplay. And if you've learned wrong procedures or gotten into bad habits of the process of writing a screenplay, you have to relearn how to do it. And it takes time. You got to rebuild the schema. And you can learn the procedure on your own. Sure, you can totally do that. But it's also one reason why I started my coaching program, the Screenplay Navigator, which is all about helping you learn and hone the process, the procedure for how to effectively write a marketable screenplay. And there's a link below if you're interested in that. But any procedure you do, whether it's screenwriting or not, is embedded in your long-term memory. But so are phobias. All of those things that scare you and that are irrational or maybe rational. I mean, I guess clowns and spiders or snakes or vampires or whatever can be really scary. You know, they should make horror movies about that. All phobias are in the long-term memory, and you can only get rid of those phobias if you have enough experiences or participate in enough stories to reprogram your schema in the brain. But I've got bad news. If you're scared of people in masks and then you go and watch a horror movie where the villain wears a mask, you're still going to be scared of people in masks because you're reinforcing your phobia by participating in that story. And horror producers are counting on you to do that. But something else in your long-term memory, and honestly something that telling a story that matters can help change the world that you need to know: biases. You have a bias. We all have a bias. We all have lots of biases probably, and we all have them. So put on your adult pants and admit it like an adult and take a good look at yourself. Biases are in our long-term memory, and the only way they're coming out is over time, and if we participate in enough new experiences or enough new stories that will shape our mind and reprogram our schema to no longer have those biases. I interact with people who will say things like, why can't we all just get along? And I think on some level, we all feel this. But you know why we can't? Well, now you do. It's because biases are in our long-term memory. No one, not even you, can change them overnight. It's not like flipping a switch. It takes time, new experiences, well-told stories that matter. That's why you tell stories that matter. Stories can literally change the world if you're taking the time to tell one that matters. And I hope you do. If you want to learn about a bunch of tools of story and storytelling, join my Fast Track course. If you want to learn about how stories work, now that you know why they work, check out my book. It's linked below. And if you want to learn something else about screenwriting, hit pause for a few seconds, and then watch this. Don't forget about fun buttons and other links below that might be helpful to you, and when you tell a story, learn the tools and make sure it is well told, and tell a story that matters. See you later.